So, picture this Christmas morning, right? My sister's kids are unwrapping brand new iPads and a MacBook Air, screaming with excitement, and my own kids, well, they get socks. Just socks? Yeah, the kind you buy in a pack of 20 at first. I smiled and nodded like it was fine, but deep down, I knew something was off. There's money being hidden, favors being bought, and manipulation everywhere. And here's the thing, you're not gonna believe what happens next. I remember pulling into the driveway of my childhood home, completely wiped out. My body was screaming for rest. 3 weeks straight of orchestrating a global logistics merger had me running on. I don't even know, maybe 3-4 hours of sleep a night, living off airport coffee and sheer adrenaline. My throat was raw, my joints ached, and I swear I was seeing things that weren't there. I felt feverish, nauseous, and honestly, I was kind of hallucinating, but I kept telling myself, just push through. Family was calling, so I did. I had rallied Mark, my husband, and our 2 kids, Liam and Maya, for this 4-hour drive because Mom had made it very clear this Christmas was non-negotiable. It's about family, Jane, she had said, guilt dripping from every syllable. And yeah, I get it. I do. But that didn't make the 1,000 little stabs of exhaustion and resentment any easier to swallow. The gravel crunched under the tires of our SUV. And instead of that warm wave of nostalgia I usually felt when I pulled into this driveway, I got a headache. My body just screamed, and my brain was a foggy, buzzing mess. I was already running on fumes. But I had to be the good daughter. You know, the reliable one. The one who doesn't ruin family holidays. The one who shows up even when every fiber of her being is begging her to crawl back into bed. Stepping inside, the living room hit me like a punch. Red and gold everywhere, lights twinkling, ornaments sparkling, garlands perfectly draped. It was the kind of scene you'd expect to see on a holiday card. But my eyes, my brain, they just couldn't take it in the way they used to. I felt heavy, like I was wearing a lead coat. My feet dragged as I followed Mark and the kids into the house. My dad, Arthur, was lounging in his leather recliner, a scotch in hand, as if it were the most normal thing to sip alcohol at 10 in the morning. My sister, Jessica, was sprawled on the sofa, thumb swiping across her phone, completely absorbed. And the kids, my nieces and nephew, were bouncing with excitement, their energy almost painful to witness when I felt like collapsing into the nearest chair. Then there was Mom, Catherine. She appeared from the kitchen, that sharpness in her eyes, the kind that cuts before she even says a word. She didn't hug me. She just brushed lint off my shoulder, and her voice dripped with that tiny bit of venom she always manages to hide behind a smile. You look tired, Jane. Really should take better care of yourself. You look 10 years older than Jessica. Hi, Mom. Merry Christmas, I rasped, trying to keep my voice steady, ignoring the jab. I sank onto the ottoman, my body screaming in protest, and just tried to settle into some semblance of composure. The room felt like a stage, and I was the weary actor forced to play the part of dutiful daughter. But the tension was palpable, creeping into the edges of every smile, every forced pleasantry. I could feel it simmering between my sister and me, between my parents and me. Like static electricity you didn't notice until you reached for the doorknob. My eyes wandered over the scene. The decorations were perfect, absurdly perfect, almost mocking. The ornaments caught the morning light just so, and the tree sparkled as if it knew the performance that was about to unfold. My dad's scotch gleamed in the sunlight streaming through the windows, a little too luxurious for someone who constantly complained about money. Jessica, ever the picture of smug contentment, leaned back into the sofa, mimosa in hand, completely at ease. And me, I felt like a ghost of myself, pretending to be present while my body and mind fought me at every step. Mark's hand found mine, squeezing it lightly, a subtle reminder that I wasn't alone, even though I had to play the role of peacemaker. Liam and Maya followed silently, probably sensing my exhaustion but still excited about the day. I could see the tension in their small faces, the hesitation as they tried to balance politeness with excitement. And I knew, deep down, that the day was going to be long, messy, and emotionally draining. I could feel the storm brewing under all the tinsel and wrapping paper. Mom's eyes flicked to me again, scanning my face, probably looking for any sign of weakness. Any moment where she could jab or guilt trip me. And Jessica, she was already sizing me up. That tiny, knowing smirk on her lips. She had always been the one to exploit cracks, to find the exact spot where she could press and press until I gave in. And today, I just knew, would be no different. I tried to focus on the little things, the smell of the pine tree, the faint scent of baked goods wafting from the kitchen, but everything felt off. Even the kids' laughter sounded a little sharper, a little too loud, like it was underscoring the unfairness of the morning. I took a deep breath, let it out slowly, and reminded myself this is just the start. There's going to be a gift exchange soon, and I already knew, even before a single present was unwrapped, that it wasn't going to be fair. Not at all. I sank further into the ottoman, feeling the weight of every sleepless night, every airport lounge, every coffee-fueled strategy session. My body wanted to give up, but my mind was bracing for the collision course that was Christmas morning in my family. The lights twinkled, the scotch gleamed, the kids bounced, and I knew, I knew what was coming next. And, well, I also knew I had to survive it without losing myself entirely. So, I just sat there, quiet, holding on to Mark's hand, and waited for the storm to hit. The gift exchange started almost as soon as we walked in, like it was a signal that the real performance was about to begin. Wrapping paper flew through the air, ribbons tangled, and the excited shrieks of my nieces and nephew filled the room. My parents were practically shoving huge, heavy boxes into the kids' hands. The first one to be opened, a brand new MacBook Air. The twins practically exploded, squealing like the world had just handed them its greatest treasure. Then came the iPads, 2 of them, and for the teenager, an iPhone 15 Pro. Each unwrapping felt like a little dagger, puncturing the fragile calm I'd tried to hold on to all morning. Jessica sat back, leaning against the sofa, a mimosa in her hand, smirking like she had orchestrated this entire scene herself. Wow, Mom, Dad, you guys really outdid yourselves, she said, her voice dripping with fake surprise. You shouldn't have, Arthur, puffing out his chest, boomed. Nonsense. We take care of our own, only the best. I glanced at Liam and Maya, my own children, sitting patiently with their hands in their laps. They didn't scream, they didn't jump, they didn't squeal with delight, they just waited. My heart tightened. They were so good. They were waiting for something that wasn't coming. And then Catherine, my mother, reached under the tree. Her hands emerged with two small, softly cut lumpy packages wrapped in what could only be described as dollar store paper. She handed one to Liam and then the other to Maya. Her smile was tight, almost like it was holding back something sharp. "Go on," she said. My stomach sank as I watched them tear into the paper. Inside, Liam found a plastic bag of white athletic tube socks, the kind you buy in a 20-pack at a warehouse store. Maya opened hers to find gray socks, the same style. The room went quiet. I mean, really quiet. The contrast between the $3,000 worth of electronics in my nephew's hands and the $5 worth of cotton in my children's violent, absurd. My brain kept waiting for a punchline, like surely there's more coming. Right. But there wasn't? "Oh," Liam said, his voice small, almost inaudible. "Thanks. Grandma, I needed socks." My heart shattered into a million little pieces. I looked at my mother. I looked at my father. I was waiting for the real gifts, the ones that would make it okay. But the silence told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a joke. This was intentional. "We're on a fixed income." "Jane," Catherine said suddenly, her voice cutting through the silence before I could even form a word. "Your father and I spent what we could afford. Jessica has had a hard year being a single mom and all. We had to prioritize. You understand, you have so much already." I looked at Jessica. The single mom line. Yeah, not really. She was divorced, living in a condo paid for by Dad, and receiving massive alimony. The coldness in my chest had nothing to do with the fever I was fighting. This wasn't about the electronics. It wasn't about the money. It was about the message. They mattered. My children didn't. I could buy them iPads if I wanted to. But that wasn't the point. The point was the statement they were making with this gift exchange. Jessica is special. My kids are disposable. I looked at my father, Arthur, the man whose consulting business I had been funding for 6 years, who was currently sipping a $50 scotch. "We spent what we could afford," Catherine repeated, almost daring me to say something. I swallowed the scream building in my raw throat. I looked at my children, bravely putting on their socks over their tights and jeans, trying to be polite, despite the absurdity of it all. I looked at my mother and, with a calm I didn't even fully feel, I said, "Fair. That is completely fair." Inside, though, my betrayal cut deeper than any fever or exhaustion. This wasn't just a rejection of me. This was a rejection of my children, funded by my own bank account. My chest tightened. I sipped lukewarm water to keep from gagging on the bitterness. Meanwhile, the chaos around me continued. Jessica's kids were already setting up their new devices, heads bent over glowing screens, ignoring everyone else. Liam and Maya, by contrast, were playing tic-tac-toe with a scrap of wrapping paper and a pen Mark had found in his pocket. Mark's hands were trembling as he clenched mine under the table. He wanted to leave right then and there, but I held on, squeezing his hand just enough to make my silent plea not yet. Not in front of the kids. Then Arthur, in his typical performative tone, tried to draw attention back to himself. "So, Jane," he said, loud enough for Jessica's new boyfriend, Chad, to hear. "How's the little logistics job still moving boxes around?" I said, voice steady, masking the fire inside. "It's going well. Dad, we just closed a merger with a European distributor." Arthur waved dismissively. paper pushing, in my consulting work. I deal with high-level strategy, real big picture stuff. Just last week, I had to advise a firm on restructuring their entire debt profile, save them millions. Jessica nodded with awe, totally bought in. Whispering to Chad, "Dad's a genius. He's practically retired, but these companies just won't let him go. They pay him a fortune just to pick his brain." A bitter smile formed on my lips. A fortune? Funny. Considering I've been keeping this entire facade afloat. 6 years ago, he called me, crying, desperate. "We're going to lose the house. Janie, I made some bad investments. Please, you can't tell your mother." He had begged. I had agreed to send $1,800 a month to cover the mortgage and bills, pretending it was a consulting fee. And now, here he was, using that illusion to humiliate my children in front of the entire family. "Must be nice," Jessica chimed in, looking at me. "To have a job where you can just travel all the time and ignore your family. I could never do that. My kids are my world. That's why Mom and Dad help me out. They know I prioritize family over a paycheck." I could hardly breathe. She was lecturing me on priorities while my children sat on the floor with socks. Catherine added, almost piously, "Jane is self-sufficient. She barely needs our love, it seems, with how busy she is." I stood up, my vision spinning slightly, but I locked my knees. "We need to get going," I said, voice low. "Careful. I'm not feeling well." "Leaving already?" Catherine scoffed. "We haven't even had pie. I think I have a fever." "Mom, I don't want to get anyone sick," I replied. "Fine." She sighed, dismissively, like I was some petulant teenager. "Go. But don't expect us to drive up to your place for New Year's. The roads are terrible, and Arthur is too busy with his clients." I nodded, guiding the kids to the car. Dad came out to the porch, lowering his voice. "Hey, Janie, with inflation and property taxes going up, do you think we could bump the transfer to $2,000 for a few months?" I looked at him. Really looked, and saw the entitlement in his eyes. He didn't see me. He saw an ATM. I opened the car door, said, "We can talk about finances later. Dad, Merry Christmas," and closed it. The silence in the car was deafening. Mark looked at me, pale and trembling. "That was the most disgusting display I've ever seen," he whispered. And honestly, he was right. It was more than gifts. It was a message, a hierarchy. And that Christmas morning, wrapped in red and gold, I realized the fight had only just begun. It all started years ago, 6 to be exact. My dad, Arthur, wasn't exactly what anyone would call financially savvy, at least not in the way he presented himself. On the surface, he had this persona, the successful consultant, the wise patriarch, the guy whose advice was worth millions. But behind closed doors, not so much. 6 years ago, he called me, desperate, crying on the phone. I could hear the shake in his voice. "Jane, we're going to lose the house," he sobbed. "I made some bad investments. Please, you can't tell your mother. You can't tell anyone. It would ruin me." I was 30 at the time, just promoted to director, starting to build my own life. But there was this voice inside me, that little one that still wanted to help the family, that said, "Okay, fine, I'll do it." And so, I did. I agreed to set up what he called a consulting fee, $1,800 a month. No questions asked. He would pretend it was income from some imaginary consulting work. And in reality, it went straight to keeping their bills paid. Mortgage, utilities, car payments, basically propping up a life they couldn't actually afford. I told him, I'll handle it, but you have to cut back. And he promised he would. For years. I did exactly that. Every first of the month, I'd transfer the money. I watched them live this illusion, maintain this facade of financial competence. All while I worked, traveled, and managed my own family. I thought it was helping. I thought I was being the good daughter. But here's the thing. People will use what you give them in ways you never imagine. They didn't pay down the mortgage. They didn't save a dime. Instead, they spent. Oh boy, did they spend on cars, luxury trips, and, well, Christmas presents for Jessica's kids that were worth more than our mortgage some months? And yet, every time the subject came up, they acted like I was being unreasonable, like, Jane, it's just a little help. You don't understand how hard it is. And they looked at me like I was the villain if I ever hesitated. But let me back up a bit. On that Christmas, I started putting the pieces together. The socks, the iPads, the MacBooks, why they didn't have the money. My dad had been living on a house of cards, using the monthly transfers I sent to create the illusion that everything was fine. I started checking things in real time. I pulled up the banking history, filtered transactions, and then it hit me the mortgage in November. Bounced. Insufficient funds. Fee, $35. How had they covered it? I scrolled further. Payday loans, cash advances. They were literally taking out predatory loans to cover their day-to-day living while living like they were rolling in money. December 20th, cash advance, $4,000. December 21st, Best Buy, $3,200. I did the math, and my stomach turned. They had bought Jessica's kids' iPads, a MacBook, and an iPhone with a cash advance and my monthly transfer. They were literally relying on me to bail them out at the beginning of January to cover minimum payments on these cards. I remember shaking, my hand hovering over the cancel transfer button on my phone. Part of me wanted to just stop it, just stop sending money and watch them scramble. But then, another part of me knew that wasn't enough. That would just make me the villain in their narrative. No, I needed more than a simple stop. I needed to dismantle the whole lie, and so I pressed cancel. The confirmation popped up. Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring transfer? I hit yes. And then I did something else. Something I'd planned years before, when I had forced my dad to put my name on the deed as a silent partner. Technically, I was paying the mortgage, but the house was in their names. I checked the mortgage status. It was an auto draft from their account. If the money wasn't there by January 4th, it would bounce. 10 days. 10 days for them to scramble, think, panic, do whatever they could to maintain their image. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I felt empowered. January 1st came, and normally, my phone would buzz at 9 a.m. with confirmation $1,800 sent. Not this year, nothing. I sat at my kitchen island, a mug of tea in my hands, staring at the gray winter light. Mark was helping the kids with a Lego set in the living room. Peaceful? Normal? But inside my head, war. I knew exactly what was happening 4 hours away. Dad was frantically refreshing his banking app, thinking there was a holiday delay. I took a deep breath and opened my laptop. It was time to switch from daughter to auditor. I logged into the shared account they'd added me to years ago in desperation. The transaction history was a digital autopsy of their recklessness. I scrolled through December, November, October, and the pattern was clear. The money wasn't going to bills, it was going to themselves, to luxuries, to maintain a fantasy life. I felt rage, yes, but also this cold, vindicated clarity. Every missed mortgage, every cash advance, every indulgent purchase was proof. Proof that they had exploited me, that they had used my labor and my money to prop up an illusion of competence and generosity. They weren't just irresponsible, they were parasitic. And then, the Christmas transactions, the cash advance, the Best Buy charges, the $500 given to Jessica after the sock debacle. That's when I realized they weren't just spending recklessly. They were weaponizing my money to humiliate my children, to reward the daughter who had never had to struggle and to punish mine. My hands shook, and my heart raced, but there was no panic. There was strategy. I was building the case, understanding exactly how deep the manipulation went, how long they had relied on me as their lifeline. January 2nd came. Phone buzzed. Dad. Hey, Janie, Happy New Year. Just checking on the consulting invoice. Hasn't hit the account yet. Probably a bank glitch. Right. I stared at the text, feeling a mixture of disbelief and disgust. Consulting invoice. Still playing the lie even in private messages. I didn't respond. Not yet. I let him stew. I needed him to feel the weight of what was happening, to realize this wasn't a glitch. This wasn't a temporary pause. This was a termination. I spent the next 2 days in a suspended state, went to work, managed my team, cooked for the kids. Every so often my phone would buzz and I'd feel that jolt of adrenaline, knowing the panic was spreading 4 hours away. I contacted a real estate lawyer friend, sending him screenshots, checking my liability. Thankfully, I was a co-signer on the deed, but not on the note. If the house foreclosed, I'd lose the equity. Yes, but my credit would remain intact. Leverage. The house was leverage, the stage of their financial theater. January 4th, mortgage draft day. My phone rang. I answered, calm, detached. Hello. Arthur exploded immediately, his voice raw panic, no pretenses left. Jane, Jesus Christ, do you have any idea how many times I've called? The money isn't there. The mortgage draft hits at noon. Wire it now. I said nothing for a beat. I let the panic sit there, then steady, quiet. I heard you, Arthur, and I'm not wiring the money. Not today, not next month, never again. Silence. He couldn't even respond. And in that silence, I finally felt it, the mix of vindication, relief, and yes, a little terrifying power. 6 years of being the dutiful daughter, the silent provider, the one propping up everyone else's fantasy, they were gone in a single text, in a single click, in a single moment of truth. And finally, I could breathe. Sitting in the car after Christmas, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion, rage, and something else. Clarity. Mark kept glancing at me, hands tight on the steering wheel, and I could tell he was just as shaken by the morning as I was. The scene replayed in my head over and over, the socks in my kids' hands, the iPads and MacBooks in my nephew's laps, Jessica's smug smile, my mother's sharp words. But now, with the absurdity and cruelty of it all laid bare, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't in years control. I realized I didn't have to keep playing their game. I didn't have to keep feeding the illusion. I could change the rules. The recurring $1,800 transfer had been my invisible leash for 6 years. Each month, without fail, it went into my father's account, disguised as a consulting fee, covering the mortgage, the utilities, the cars, everything they claimed they couldn't afford. I'd believed I was helping, that I was doing my part quietly, keeping the family afloat. But seeing how they had used that money, how they'd exploited it to humiliate my children, to prop up a fantasy life, I realized it wasn't help anymore. It was fuel for their manipulation. And that fuel ended now. My thumb hovered over the cancel button. I stared at it, red, bright, and final. Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring transfer? The words seemed to pulse, like they were daring me to back down. I swallowed. My body shook a little. Fear it was there. Yeah. What if they collapsed? What if my mom found out first and hated me? What if my dad came after me, legally or emotionally? All of that rushed into my mind in one overwhelming wave. But underneath it was something stronger, something solid, empowerment. For the first time in 6 years, I wasn't the powerless daughter. I wasn't just the quiet bank account. I had leverage, and I knew it. I pressed yes. And then I did something else. Something most people wouldn't even think of. Years earlier, when the whole consulting charade began, I had made my father put my name on the deed as a silent partner. He'd promised it was just for security, so I'd have a legal foothold if anything went wrong with the house. At the time, I thought it was just another way to protect their investment, their pride. Now, I realized it was my secret weapon if the payment stopped, if I held back. I wasn't just denying the money, I had the legal leverage to control the outcome. My name on the deed wasn't just a detail, it was the ace up my sleeve. I logged into the county clerk's website, my heart pounding in my chest. Everything was as I remembered. I could see the mortgage details, the auto draft schedule, the balances. The draft pulled from my father's account on the 5th of every month. Today was December 25th. I had 10 days. 10 days until the money was supposed to hit. 10 days for them to scramble, to sweat, to realize that the game they thought they controlled had just shifted. I leaned back in the seat, closing my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. My body still burned with the fever I'd been fighting for weeks. My joints a dull, persistent ache. But that clarity in my head, the cold, strategic clarity made the pain fade into the background. I could feel the tension coiling like a spring in my chest. I imagined my father checking his bank account, refreshing over and over, trying to convince himself that this was some kind of glitch. And then, the sinking realization, it would be too late to spin it. The moment would arrive, and I would be in control. Mark's hand found mine again. He squeezed it, grounding me. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I took a slow breath. "Better than okay," I said, voice low, almost a whisper. "I'm digging." He frowned. "What do you mean, digging leverage?" I said simply. The word hung between us. If I just stopped sending money, they'd spin the story immediately. They'd tell the aunts, the uncles, anyone who would listen, that I'd borrowed money and refused to pay it back, or that I was abandoning them in their old age. I had to control the narrative before they did. I opened the shared account that, technically, I wasn't supposed to have access to. Years ago, when the arrangement had started, my dad had added me as a failsafe, In case something happens to you, Jane, you can manage the estate. I'd forgotten I still had the login credentials. He thought I was just a passive cash spigot, blindly sending money without oversight. How wrong he was. The transaction history loaded, a 3-month snapshot at first, and I began scrolling. My heart hammered in my chest as the numbers filled the screen. December 2nd, income, $1,800 transfer from me. December 3rd, mortgage payment, $1,450. December 4th, cash withdrawal, $300. Okay, manageable, I thought. But then I looked at November 1st, $1,800 transfer. November 2nd, Nordstrom, $450. November 3rd, Liquor Barn, $210. November 5th, mortgage payment insufficient funds. Fee, $35. I stared at the screen, mouth slightly open. They had bounced a mortgage payment just to buy clothes and alcohol. Scrolling further, my stomach dropped. November 8th, payday loan deposit, $1,500. They were covering bills by taking out predatory loans, all while using my money to maintain appearances. And then I found it the Christmas transactions. December 20th, cash advance, $4,000. December 21st, Best Buy, $3,200. I did the math. They didn't have the money for the iPads, MacBooks, and iPhones. They'd taken a cash advance, expecting my January 1st transfer to cover the minimum payment on that card. December 27th, $500 transfer to Jessica, right after the sock gift. I felt a mix of nausea and fury. They were literally spending my money to humiliate my children and reward my sister. I closed my eyes, letting it all sink in. 6 years of quietly funding a lie, and now the gloves were off. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about strategy, about making sure the truth did the heavy lifting. I could feel the power settle in my chest, a mix of fear and excitement. It was terrifying. Yeah, but also freeing. I imagined the countdown the auto draft scheduled for January 4th. They had 10 days to figure it out. 10 days to panic, to scramble, to realize that the daughter they thought they controlled had finally stopped playing along. I felt the weight of it, the anticipation, and the sharp thrill of knowing that, for once, the narrative wasn't theirs to control. Mark's hand still held mine, grounding me, a reminder that I wasn't alone. But inside, I was entirely in my own head, mapping out what would happen, considering every reaction, every lie they might spin, the socks, the iPads, the fake consulting fee. It all became part of a larger picture, a story I was finally ready to tell on my terms. And for the first time, after years of exhaustion and silent frustration, I could see the storm coming, and more importantly, I knew I was standing in the eye of it. The morning of January 2nd started quietly, almost deceptively calm. My phone buzzed, and I saw it was Dad, Arthur. I didn't answer at first. Let him sweat. I thought he had no idea I'd pressed cancel, that the transfer wasn't coming. The silence stretched. Minutes felt like hours. Then a text. Hey, Janie, Happy New Year. Just checking on the consulting invoice. Hasn't hit the account yet. Probably a bank glitch. Right. Let me know when you resend. Love. Dad. I stared at the screen. Consulting invoice. Still playing the part, even privately, as if the lie could protect him. I didn't respond. Not yet. Mark peeked over my shoulder. Are you going to answer that? He asked, concern in his voice. Not yet, I said, quietly. I needed him to realize this wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a temporary pause. It was a termination. I wanted him to feel the panic, the uncertainty. I wanted him to understand that the daughter he'd treated like an ATM had finally gained control. As the hours passed, the phone buzzed again. January 3rd, 10 Dad. Jane, is everything okay? I need that transfer today. The mortgage pulls tomorrow. My stomach tightened. The desperation was palpable, even through the screen. 4 p.m. Another text. Pick up the phone. This isn't funny. 8:30 p.m. Mom, your father is very stressed. There's a problem with your bank. Please call him immediately. It's affecting his blood pressure. I ignored them all. I sipped my tea, letting the adrenaline hum through me. I was building the case, carefully, deliberately. I contacted a friend in real estate law, sending screenshots of the deed, the mortgage history, and all transactions. I needed to know my liability. Turns out, I was safe. I was on the deed, but not the note. If they foreclosed, I'd lose equity, but no credit damage, leverage. I could feel the weight of it, the full scope of what I held. The house, the mortgage, the fake consulting fees, it was my power now. And Dad had no idea. January 4th, the day the mortgage was set to auto-draft. My phone rang. I walked into my home office, closed the door, and sat down. Engaged, calm. Hello, I said. Cool, detached. Arthur's voice exploded immediately. Jane, Jesus Christ, do you have any idea how many times I've called you? The money isn't there. The mortgage draft hits at noon. Wire it right now. Do an instant transfer. I'll pay the fee. I let a pause stretch long enough to feel heavy in the room. Heavy over the line. He couldn't see me, but I can feel his panic. Then I said, steady. I heard you, Arthur. I'm not wiring the money. Not today. Not next month. Never again. There was silence. A long, suffocating silence. He sputtered, tried to regain composure, his voice cracking as he attempted to pivot to a reasonable businessman. It didn't work. He realized he couldn't control me anymore. Then Jessica called. I almost didn't pick up. I knew this was going to be theater. Her voice was piercing, high-pitched. What did you do to Mom? She screamed. No preamble. I hesitated. Letting curiosity mix with dread, I asked, what exactly did he tell you? He said you convinced him to invest his retirement money in one of your companies, she yelled. And you lost it all. Now you're refusing to pay them back. How could you steal from them? I almost laughed. The creativity, the audacity. He couldn't admit I'd been supporting them, so he invented a scenario where I owed him money. Genius, in a twisted sort of way. That is a complete lie, Jessica, I said firmly. Don't lie to me. Dad showed me the text where he asked for the consulting invoice. That's obviously code for the investment payout. He's trying to be professional, but you're screwing it up. I could hear her catching her breath through the phone. Frustration building. Mom is terrified. She thinks they're going to lose the house because you won't release the money. She screamed. I stayed calm. Jessica, listen to me. There is no investment. I've been paying their mortgage for 6 years out of my own pocket. I paused, letting it settle. Does Dad, a man who is being robbed by his own daughter, buy iPads for your kids? No, that's what I thought. The line was quiet for a moment, And then she shrieked, "You are delusional. I'm telling everyone, Aunt Martha, Grandma. They're going to know what a thief you are." I kept my voice level, cutting through the chaos. "Be careful what you say, Jess. I have receipts." "Receipts. Dad has a lawyer. He's going to sue you," she shouted, but it was already too late. I hung up, stunned at the velocity of their lies, the way he had weaponized Jessica as an attack dog. Within hours, even my social media feed had gone quiet. Too quiet. Then, I saw a post from Aunt Martha, asking for prayers for Dad, betrayal by family. Yes, but also isolation. They were trying to destroy me, spin the narrative, control the story. Mark leaned over, his face purple with rage. "This is liable. We need to sue them." I shook my head. "No, lawsuit takes years. They'll lose the house in months. We need to end this now. Clear my name publicly, quickly." I knew what I had to do. They couldn't lie if I held the truth, the undeniable proof. I went back to my investigation, connecting all the dots. Emails from 6 years ago where Dad begged me for $1,800 monthly, telling me to label it consulting so Mom wouldn't worry. Bank statements, cash advances, luxury charges, Christmas presents, all of it. I created the full picture. The consulting fee was a lie. Every dollar I sent was to keep their illusion alive. Every dollar they spent on indulgences, on humiliating my children, was evidence. I didn't rush. I paced, sipped tea, let Mark observe quietly, understanding that timing mattered. The narrative wasn't mine alone to control, yet it had to unfold with precision. Each mistransfer, each frustrated phone call from Dad, each frantic text was a signal, a pulse. I could feel the tension stretching across the miles, his desperation growing by the hour. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Then it happened. January 4th, mortgage draft day. Overdraft alert came in. $450 short. Payment bounced. Arthur had nothing to cover it. No buffer. No safety net. I felt a strange calm wash over me. The domino had fallen. Their carefully constructed story, 6 years in the making, had shattered. I sat back, letting the realization settle. The fallout would be messy. Yes, but this time, the power was mine. They could panic, they could yell, but the truth was no longer theirs to manipulate. In those moments, I realized what 6 years of silent obedience and quiet support had taught me: control, leverage, and patience. I'd waited, observed, gathered proof, and finally, the tables had turned. And from that quiet morning, with Mark beside me and the house peaceful around us, I knew the family that had always tried to control me, to weaponize me, was now at the mercy of the very system they had created. Walking up the driveway to Aunt Martha's house that evening, my stomach was twisting in knots. The place looked as elegant as always, lights twinkling, cars lined up, the kind of grand suburban estate that felt neutral but intimidating at the same time. The driveway was full, and there, in front, gleamed the leased BMW my parents had somehow managed to park like it was a monument to wealth they didn't actually have. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. Mark was beside me, and I could feel his calm confidence like a shield. In his hand, he carried the satchel with the laptop, the projector, the full dossier I'd spent days compiling, every page color-coded, every email and bank statement ready to tell the story I'd kept in my head for 6 long years. Are you sure you want to do this here? Mark asked quietly. As we stepped onto the porch, I looked at him and nodded. Yes. In front of everyone, they made it public when they lied to Aunt Martha. Now the audience deserves to see the final act. The sound of laughter drifted through the house, clinking glasses and the hum of polite conversation. For a moment, I felt that old pang of guilt, the one that had taught me for decades to avoid rocking the boat. But then I remembered Liam's face with those tube socks. I remembered the texts, the consulting invoice, the cash advances. The guilt evaporated. I had to do this. I had to reveal the truth. We walked in, and suddenly, 20 heads turned. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen in a year. And there, at the head of the dining room table, sat Arthur and Catherine. Arthur looked composed, triumphant even, dressed in his best suit, holding a glass of wine. He thought he had won. He expected me to walk in, apologize quietly, and hand over the check for another year of their illusion. Jessica sat to his right, the same smug expression, ready to reinforce their narrative. The room went deadly silent when I spoke. Actually, Dad, I said, voice projecting, calm but firm. We need to have a little discussion. Heads turned further. Aunt Martha raised an eyebrow, clearly sensing tension. Arthur smiled, expectant, like a cat watching a mouse scurry. I stepped to the end of the table, Mark behind me, laptop in hand, projector in tow. I didn't sit down. Not yet. I wanted the room, the audience, to feel the gravity of the moment. You're right. We had a misunderstanding, I said slowly, letting my words hang. And Jessica's right too, but I brought the financial documents. Arthur's smile faltered slightly. Excellent, he said, reaching out his hand. Just give them here, and we can put this ugly mess behind us. I ignored him. Instead, I set up the projector, plugged in the HDMI cable, and let the laptop desktop illuminate the large 70-inch TV mounted on the wall. The room went still. A few cousins leaned in, curious, eyes wide. Aunt Martha glanced from me to the screen, frowning slightly. Catherine's voice rose. Shrill Jane, this is rude. Not rude, Mom. Clarification, I said evenly. I opened the first file, a blown-up PDF of an email from 6 years ago. The font was large, readable, undeniable. I pointed at the sender, Arthur H., and the subject line, please help. Janie, he wrote, we're in trouble. The plant let me go. I have 0 savings. The house is leveraged. If Mom finds out I'm a failure, she'll leave me. Please, if you can send $1,800 a month, I can pretend I have a consulting gig. You are saving my life. A gasp went through the room, audible and sharp. Arthur froze, his face turning from flush to chalk white in seconds. He stood, knocking back his chair, panic replacing the triumphant mask he'd worn for decades. Turn that off, he whispered, barely audible. What is that? Aunt Martha asked, squinting at the screen. Arthur, you said you retired voluntarily. You said you had a pension, she said incredulously. It's a fake, I said calmly. From your email address, but let's look at the financials. I clicked to the next slide. Slide 2, the flow of funds. A spreadsheet appeared showing 6 years of monthly transfers. Source my personal checking, destination Dad's account, memo Dad's consulting. Total transferred $129,600. I narrated slowly, looking around the room. I have sent $1,800 a month for 6 years. This was not an investment. It was not a loan. It was a subsidy to keep a roof over their heads because they spent their retirement savings on cars, trips, and luxuries. Jessica screamed, standing up, trembling. "Arthur, tell them she's lying." Arthur couldn't speak. His mouth opened and closed like a fish. The silence in the room was thick, suffocating. Every pair of eyes, my cousins, Aunt Martha, the extended family, they were all staring. The facade he had polished for decades was collapsing in real time. I clicked to the final slide, slide 3, the Christmas 2025 transactions. Side-by-side bank statements left. Income my transfer, right. Expenditures the cash advance. Best Buy purchases. The $500 transfer to Jessica. Mortgage bounced on January 4th. Turning to Jessica, I said softly but firmly, "You didn't buy those gifts." "I did. Dad took the money I sent for the house, plus a high-interest cash advance to buy your kids electronics, to play the hero. And because of that, the mortgage bounced 3 days ago. That is the investment I supposedly stole. I simply stopped paying the allowance, and the consulting firm went bankrupt the moment I did." The room went absolutely silent, heavy, suffocating. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Aunt Martha slowly stood up, her face a mixture of shock and heartbreak. She looked at Arthur, then at me. "Is this true? Have you been living off Jane this whole time?" Arthur's eyes darted around, panicked, pleading. Every person in the room was judging him now. The lie he had maintained for so long, the narrative that had cast me as the cold workaholic, was crumbling. He looked small, old, defeated. The arrogance, the confident mask, it was gone. I turned to Mom. "You told me you spent what you could afford. You were right. You spent me." Her lips pressed into a thin line, and the truth hung between us, undeniable and cold. Jessica burst into tears, but not of contrition. "I have to give the iPads back. That's not fair. The kids love them. You can't take them back now." I disconnected the laptop and shoved it into my bag. "Keep them," I said softly. "They cost you your parents' home. I hope they were worth it." I looked at Arthur one last time. He had sunk back into his chair, slumping, the mask of benevolent patriarch completely shattered. "I'm done. Dad," I said, "the bank will contact you about the foreclosure. I suggest you answer the phone." I signaled to Mark. We were leaving. Aunt Martha called out, but I didn't stop. I walked out of the dining room, down the hall, and into the cold night air. The door clicked behind me. Inside, the explosion of voices erupted, the shouting, the crying, the accusations. I took a deep breath of freezing air. It hurt my lungs, but it felt cleaner than anything I'd breathed in years. Mark took my hand, squeezing it. "You okay?" I looked back at the house one last time. "No," I said, a little breathless, "but I will be in that moment, with the projector packed away, the evidence laid bare, and the entire family witnessing the collapse of my father's facade." I felt a strange mix of calm, satisfaction, and moral victory. The truth had done its work. The lies, the manipulation, the years of exploitation all exposed, and I knew, finally, I was free. The weeks after the confrontation were surreal. The reality of the foreclosure hit my parents hard. They couldn't refinance, their credit was shot, and the house, the one I grew up in, was sold at a short sale by April. They walked away with nothing. No equity, no nest egg. Just what could fit into a U-Haul. Jessica, too, had to adjust. The alimony wasn't enough to sustain her lifestyle without the extra handouts. She ended up moving into my parents' 2-bedroom apartment, crammed with her 3 kids, 5 people and 900 square feet. It was a stark, sobering change, but I didn't visit. The silence on my end was absolute. I blocked their numbers, their emails. When relatives tried to intervene with, "They're your parents, they're suffering," I simply forwarded the spreadsheet. The messages stopped. That chapter was closed, and it felt liberating. Mark and I took the $1,800 that had been siphoned away each month and redirected it into something meaningful for us. We called it the Joy Fund. It wasn't about big-ticket items or keeping up appearances. It was about living life with intention, creating memories that mattered. That summer, we took Liam and Maya to a cabin on a lake. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and water. The kids ran around barefoot, chasing each other across the grass, laughing until their cheeks were pink. I watched them skip stones across the lake, the sunlight glittering on the water, and I realized how long it had been since I'd felt truly present. Evenings were the best. Sitting on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the pines. I felt a quiet peace settle over me. Liam was wearing a pair of high-quality hiking socks I'd bought him, and he couldn't stop talking about how comfy they were. Maya climbed onto my lap, her small arms wrapped around me. "Mom," she asked, soft and curious. "Are Grandma and Grandpa ever coming to visit again?" I stroked her hair, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face, the gentle breeze carrying the faint scent of firewood from the cabin stove. "No, sweetie," I said softly. "They aren't. Why not?" she asked, looking up at me with wide eyes. I kissed the top of her head, thinking about the manipulation, the lies, the socks and the iPads, and how far we'd come. Because sometimes people get lost in their own stories, and until they learn to tell the truth, they can't be part of ours. I looked out at the water, the loons calling across the lake, and felt a sense of completion I hadn't known existed. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about keeping up appearances, maintaining a facade, or propping up someone else's delusions. I was free to focus on what really mattered: my children, my family, our life together. The fear, the anger, the exhaustion of those 6 years felt distant now, replaced by something stronger: clarity, empowerment, and joy. The cabin became a sanctuary. We roasted marshmallows by the fire, told stories, and watched the stars emerge one by one, twinkling in the clear night sky. Liam and Maya would drift to sleep, tired and happy, and I'd sit with Mark, sipping hot chocolate, feeling the weight of the past lift just a little more with each passing night. The laughter of my children echoed through the cabin and the surrounding woods, a sound I hadn't realized I'd been missing so desperately. Looking back, the contrast couldn't be sharper. Once, Christmas mornings had been a battleground of inequality, humiliation, and silent resentment. Now, the small, simple joys of life: a paper airplane, a fishing line cast into the lake, the smell of pine needles and sun-warmed grass were what filled our days. The financial control, the emotional manipulation, the chaos, they were gone. In their place was something richer, deeper, and entirely ours. I would catch myself smiling without thinking, watching Liam run across the lawn or Maya collecting pine cones. And I'd remember we had survived. We had taken the pain, the betrayal, and transformed it into something that could never be taken from us again. The bank statements, the spreadsheets, the emails, they were history. What mattered now was this moment, this family, this life we were building together, brick by brick, with laughter, with patience, and with love. By the time the sun fully set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I felt a profound sense of peace. My children were happy, healthy, and loved. Our bank account was growing, not as a source of anxiety, but as a foundation for experiences, security, and joy. I had lost my parents in the way I once thought mattered, but in the process, I had finally found myself, and looking at the smile on Liam's face as he splashed in the lake, I knew the trade was more than fair. I had reclaimed my life, my time, and my energy, and for the first time in a long time, I felt fully, completely at home in it. Looking back, it's wild how much one small decision can change everything. 6 years of quiet sacrifice, manipulation, and hidden truths led to a single moment where the balance finally tipped. I learned that standing up, setting boundaries, and trusting your instincts can feel scary, but it's worth it. Now, life with my kids is simple, joyful, and ours. If you've ever had to confront family drama or fight for what's right, maybe this story resonates. Hit like, share, and subscribe if you want more stories about courage and clarity.